The most dangerous retirement mistake that I see isn't running out of money. It's running out of time while you still have plenty of money. So in this video, I'll be walking you through 7 retirement statistics that will completely change how you think about when to retire, and why the data quietly suggests that you may be ready to retire today instead of working the extra years that maybe you've been planning to. If you're new here, my name is Brandon Clark. I'm a certified financial planner and certified private wealth advisor at the Clark Group. And after working with high net worth pre-retirees for about a decade, the pattern I keep seeing isn't people who save too little. It's people who save more than enough and are still waiting for permission to stop. That's exactly what these 7 stats are here to address. So let's get into it. Before we get to the numbers, I want to address something that I see constantly in my practice, something that's quietly driving very successful people to work longer than the data actually supports. Most diligent savers default to working until 65 or 67, not because the numbers say that they need to, but because that's the cultural expectation. 65 has become the assumed finish line. It's baked into how HR departments frame benefits and how even the financial media writes its headlines. And when you've spent an entire career swimming in that messaging, it becomes really hard to question whether the finish line was ever drawn in the right place specifically for you. And those ages have one more anchor point that makes them feel especially fixed. Age 65 is when Medicare kicks in, and 67 is when you're eligible for your full Social Security benefits. So for most people, it's not just a cultural default, it's a benefits checkpoint, which makes it feel less like an arbitrary number and more like the system itself is telling you when you're allowed to leave. But here's the irony. The people who need to question it most are often the least likely to. High earners, executives, engineers, doctors, small business owners, people who built their wealth through discipline, through one more year of compounding, through never taking their foot off the gas. And that exact mindset, the one that got you here, can become the thing that keeps you working 3 years past the point where the math stopped requiring it. Now, if you genuinely love what you do, if the work still energizes you and you're not grinding through stress just to add another number, then keep working. This video isn't trying to pull you out of work. But if you're staying because 65 feels like a rule you're not allowed to break, or because the fear of running out won't quiet down no matter how much you've saved, that's exactly what these 7 statistics are designed to address. So the headlines, the podcasts, the neighbor who's convinced another market crash is coming, it's all been carefully engineered to keep you nervous. Because the moment you feel financially secure enough to retire, you stop being a growth opportunity for everyone else. But 7 statistics, each coming from a completely different angle, all pointing to the same conclusion, well, that's a lot harder to dismiss. It's kind of like getting the same diagnosis from 7 different doctors. At some point, you should probably stop looking for an 8th opinion. So let me start with the one that surprises diligent savers the most, because it directly contradicts the fear that they've been carrying for decades. The first statistic is this: 150 years of historical retirement data shows that the most diligent retirees, the one with $1 million or more, end their retirement with more money than they started with, not less. Let that land for a moment, because I know it runs counter to everything the financial anxiety machine has been telling you. And William Bengen, he's a well-known financial planner. He established this in 1994 when he analyzed every 30-year retirement period going back to 1926. And he found that a balanced portfolio at a reasonable withdrawal rate didn't just survive, it typically multiplied. The Trinity study confirmed it. Morningstar confirmed it again. And I actually created a video just on this stat alone, and I'll link it in the description. And we lived through it, even from 1995, right after Bengen's analysis, to 2025 during the financial crisis, the dot-com bust, COVID. You would have ended up with a higher ending balance after that 30-year period. And the point being is that across virtually every market environment and withdrawal rate scenario that researchers have modeled, the finding holds very strong. And almost no one outside of financial planning circles has ever seen it stated plainly. What it means practically is that the fear driving the most diligent savers to keep working, that fear of running out of money, is simply not well supported by the historical evidence at your asset level. The portfolio that you've spent decades building has more durability than the headlines give it credit for. But here's the timing implication that most people ignore. If the portfolio keeps growing even while you're spending from it, then every additional year that you spend working is mostly adding to a balance you'll never actually get to enjoy. You're essentially packing for a trip that you won't let yourself take. That's the consumption gap. the diligent saver's instinct to keep accumulating even when the accumulation phase is quietly over. Once you internalize this finding, the case for working another year gets meaningfully weaker, especially if you are working a job that you don't love. So stat number 1 dismantles the running out of money fear. The second stat is about something nobody actually wants to think about, but the data is too important to ignore. Your healthy retirement years are shorter than you think. Average life expectancy at 65 is roughly 18 to 20 more years. Most people have at least a general sense of that number. But what most people haven't sat with is what the research shows about the quality of those years. Health-adjusted life expectancy data from the CDC and World Health Organization consistently shows that meaningful physical decline begins well before the end of life. The period where you have real physical capacity, where you can travel, hike, keep up with the grandkids, actually do the things that you saved for. And what about after that? Well, physical capacity declines in ways that just meaningfully change what retirement looks like day to day. Retirement isn't just one long chapter, it's 3 shorter ones. First is the go-go years. It's typically your 60s to your early 70s. Then it's the slow-go years, typically your 70s to your 80s. And eventually the no-go years, typically 80 plus. And only the first one, the go-go years, is what looks like the retirement brochure. And every year you work past your financial readiness point is a year subtracted from that first chapter, not just from total retirement time in the abstract. So the difference between retiring at 60 versus 65 isn't 5 interchangeable years. It's often 5 of your best years. Your knees work, your back cooperates. You have the energy to actually do the things that you've been picturing. And that cost doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. There's no Monte Carlo model for years of peak physical capacity forfeited. But it is arguably the largest cost most diligent savers pay because it's permanent and it's invisible until it's already happened. So when you put the longevity data next to the consumption gap from stat number 1, the picture gets clearer. The portfolio is likely fine. The window for the retirement you actually envisioned is shorter than you think. And every year you wait is buying less than you assume. Now that you see how the consumption gap and the longevity data reshape the retirement timing decision, if you'd like help taking control of your own retirement as a whole, you can use the link in the description to schedule your free discovery call with the Clark Group, with my team. We'll look at your specific situation and show you how to optimize your plan altogether so that you can apply this to your own situation. Now, back to the remaining stats. Here's a number most people have never actually run. For a household with $2 to $5 million or more saved for retirement, one additional working year typically adds only a modest increment to sustainable retirement spending, often far less than people assume when they're justifying the decision to themselves. We're talking maybe just a few $100s more per month. So one more year may not necessarily sound like a lot, but the early mornings, the full inbox, the Sunday night dread, those Sunday scaries, and the additional spending capacity that you've purchased is just incrementally small relative to the lifestyle years being traded away. And this is before taxes. So depending on your income level, that can take a meaningful slice off the top. So the reason the number is this small is that once your portfolio is large enough, one more year of contributions is somewhat minimal. You're not extending the runway anymore. You're just polishing it. And nobody's giving out awards for the most polished runway. And the 4th stat hits from the other direction. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median retirement savings for Americans that are approaching retirement remains dramatically below what most high earners assume when they benchmark themselves against the general population. So if you're watching this with $1 million or more saved, you are not average. You are not behind. Depending on your age and your net worth, you're likely within the top 10 or even 5% of households in this country, even for those age 60 plus. And by that, I mean the kind of minority where the view looks considerably different from where most people are standing, even at 60 plus. The problem is that successful people compare themselves to other successful people. I see this all the time. Your peer group, colleagues, neighbors in the zip code that you've earned your way into. They all likely have significant assets too, which makes you feel like you're just keeping pace. But that's a skewed sample. When you zoom out to the national data, your position looks very different. The elephant in the room is that your baseline is higher than most of the country, and that's a real factor. But it doesn't disqualify any of this. It just means the plan needs to be calibrated to your actual life, not the national average. So closing that perception gap changes how ready people actually feel about the decision sitting right in front of them. This stat might be one of the most important ones. Healthcare spending in retirement is not a flat line. The data shows it ramps sharply after age 70, both in absolute dollars and as a share of total retirement spending. And according to Fidelity's annual retiree healthcare cost estimates, a couple at 65 might spend around $15,000 a year on healthcare. That same couple at 60 may spend 2 to 3 times that in real dollars as Medicare premiums rise, out-of-pocket costs increase, and care needs compound. And that's before any long-term care scenario enters the picture. So here's the implication for timing. Every year that you delay retirement, more of your eventual budget shifts away from lifestyle and toward healthcare. The dollars that you pictured spending on travel and experiences increasingly have to share the ledger with medical costs that don't care what your original plan was. So the go-go years, let's say roughly 60 to 75, are when healthcare costs are lowest and physical capacity is highest. That overlap is the window that your retirement was built for. Spending these years at a desk means your discretionary budget finally arrives right when healthcare starts crowding it. So use your best dollars in your best years of retirement, not in reserve for years when health costs will be doing a lot of the spending for you. So now that you've seen the financial and healthcare stats, let me show you the last two, which are about how retirees actually feel about the decision once they've made it to retirement. Because the lived experiences matter just as much as the math. Retirees who retired earlier, voluntarily and with financial readiness, consistently report higher life satisfaction scores than those who worked longer. Gallup and the Employee Benefit Research Institution have both documented this pattern across asset levels, education levels, and geographic regions. It's not just about having more money to spend, it's a broader pattern in what earlier retirement does for quality of life. The data doesn't say earlier retirement is right for everyone. Definitely not. Well, why? Well, purpose and identity are real factors. And for some people, continued work genuinely serves those needs. But even for that type of person, we have clients who love what they do, and consulting can be an excellent middle path. You stay stimulated, you keep those relationships, and you finally get to decide when and how much without the grind that came with the full-time version. But the satisfaction data says the trade-off favors retiring sooner, more often than most retirement planning conversations are willing to acknowledge. Now, the 7 stat is the one that tends to carry the most weight in the room because it's about how people feel looking back on their career when the decision can no longer be changed. Now, Merrill Lynch's age wave research and end-of-life surveys consistently show that among workers in their 60s and 70s, the most common retirement regret by a wide margin is, I worked too long. So the regret about retiring too early is substantially less common, even among retirees who later faced unexpected expenses or market volatility that maybe they didn't see coming. So think about what that asymmetry means. The scenario that most diligent savers lie awake worrying about, retiring a year too early and maybe running short, well, it shows up far less frequently in the data than they assume. The scenario they rarely worry about, well, staying too long and leaving their best years on the conference room table. It's the retirement version of optimizing for the wrong risk. So when you stack the satisfaction and regret data on top of all 5 financial stats, the picture becomes hard to argue with. Every angle, financial outcomes, longevity, diminishing returns, savings benchmarks, healthcare dynamics, satisfaction, regret, points at the same direction. Now that you've seen the 7 retirement statistics that actually matter, from the consumption gap in the longevity window to the diminishing returns of extra work and the savings perception gap to health cost dynamics and satisfaction and the regret data, well, you can stop letting the cultural default decide when you retire and start letting the actual data inform your decision. You didn't build significant wealth by ignoring evidence. You followed the data, you made disciplined decisions, and you trusted the process. This is just one more place where the data deserves the same respect. So if you're unsure where you stand for your retirement and you want to take control of that decision, you can click the link below to schedule your free discovery call with the Clark Group. What we'll do is show you exactly how these 7 stats apply to your specific situation using our firm's profit process, our framework for integrating your taxes, your estate and legacy, and your investments cohesively together. So every piece of your retirement plan is working in the same direction at the same time. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please feel free to subscribe and like to see more videos like this in the future. I will see you in the next video.